Do freehand. Let me go and take a look at freehand. Let's clear this. And here's one of our SQL Server 2008 data servers. Now you can see the packages are defined. I'm in cell sources. Let me take a look at one of these queries. I happen to be a data architect, say in the field, that knows my data very well. So immediately I can drop in a query against a data source and extract information and use DataRoket to merge and associate this. So what we'll do is we'll go back to the Excel piece where we were at, were cell source. Let's say I want to build a query against this source. And very basic through the UI, I necessarily don't need all these fields in this query. Say I want just several of the important ones, and the ones I want to associate information with. In this case, even a single source, it makes no difference. Let me take a look. I happen to know this data, some data that looks very interesting to associate. So I'm just picking different columns, just adding different values. So let's go ahead and save this query. And we'll save this as MRI Excel query. I can save it publicly or locally, in other words, to my private user directory structure, my private user. I can share that with public users also. But you'll see, now that we go into this source, there's the MRI Excel query. Now let me clear this. Even though we can have multiple panes, let me go ahead and we'll take a look at one of the, and we'll go back a step. We'll take a look at one of the SQL servers with the data that we want. Now there's a table partner that I know. Well, once again, it doesn't have to be an individual table. This could come from many tables. Could be a complex query, whatever the case is that builds your data set. We'll take this information. You see the interface, as I mentioned before. It's the same throughout, whatever the source is. You'll see the same interface. But I'm just going to save this. Let me take away some values in here. I don't really need to know all this information. You'll see there's a very wide column, very wide table with many columns. So very denormalized structure. And there's a reason. We want to show, too, that we can bind very high columns. In other words, we've been able to associate up to 100 columns across data sources. So let me just save this. We'll save this. I'm just showing you the query as far as the SQL goes. We'll save this piece as JT accounts partners. And let's save it privately. In this case, it doesn't really matter. Now what we do is we move forward to Cell Dynamics. Cell Dynamics is where we associate this information. For example, if I was to take a look at existing queries, during our demonstrations, live demonstrations, we associate 2 million rows or so from Oracle and 2 million rows or so from SQL Server based on a multi-key relationship. In other words, several keys create the unique relationship between the data sets. So just showing an example of that. Let me go ahead and drop this in. I want to drop one of these queries in. And let's go to our trading mart that exists on SQL Server 2008. And I can drop that in. And I can do what we have, it's called a hints. Literally, in the world of data, we know the data is never clean. So in this case, you're seeing one-to-one relationships between, here happens to be one of the keys that I can add, and then also ID. These two fields create a unique variable between the two different data sources. But let me clear that. I just wanted to show that to you. I want to do something a little bit more manual so you can see if you even know your data, you can take this to a different level and associate down and change the chain that you're aware of. So let's go back into Cell Dynamics. Let's go into Excel Financials. Let's go ahead. This is one of the queries. We have several that exist already. Let me go and grab, I don't care which query. This is one of the data sources themselves. Now we already built one on our SQL side, in other words, SQL 2008. And you can see that if we drop this down, these are the different queries that we had available. This was the one that we just created. you can see that whatever the case is, whether it's small queries, whether it's single table, whether it's combined views, it makes no difference. So let's pull these two data sources in. Now together I think these are over 100 columns, and there's no way that we need all that data pulled in. So let's go ahead and associate this relationship. Let me go ahead and pull in some of this information. I'll turn off some of these variables. It doesn't make a difference. I'm just randomly going through the list just to make it a bit smaller. A lot of data. And let's go ahead and say we're going to pull some information from our Excel side of the house, or Excel side of the data. And I'm just randomly pulling whatever the values are that I think may be interesting. So let me just choose some. Let me turn some off here, I suppose. The idea is that we want to make sure we show numerics, dates, dimensions, strings, all those types. And let me build an association across these sources. So let me say investor ID relates to the F001N value, which is another investor type of value in the second data source. And you can see the different inner and outer joins. In other words, do we want all data that's associated? Do we want data from the left to the right? Whatever the case is. So let me go ahead and let me turn off a few of these. It doesn't matter. Let me save this now. Now these are the two different levels that we offer in DataRoket. You'll see there's real-time, which means we're defining a real-time relationship. That data obviously comes back on point of click or refresh immediately. And then there's persisted cells as part of the DataRoket data mart. Now you can see our different flavors, our customized data, and we'll go down the list very quickly. Customized data is simply XML that we customize in a format that we strip out a lot of the redundancy in elements and attributes. Compressed data is what we offer in DataRoket as real-time compression. In other words, as a data row comes in, we compress that data, and it's inline block compression. Very important. It helps tremendously in the scalability when we start speaking to the 10 million row plus environments. Flat file, just that, just flat file partition data, and compressed data too. We do offer DML, which is really an insert, update, and delete. In other words, anything that's query-based or SQL-based on our databases, we can give you that output too in a flat file. So let's go ahead and save this. Our cell density just really means what we do behind the scenes are we have multi-blocks of information in persisted and in memory format. So as columns are wider and data providers are wider, you would say, well, let's make this 30,000 row cell groups. And the reason being is there's a certain level of information that we have behind the scenes in what we call histos in our in-memory pointers that relate to this. If I only had 4 columns, for example, you would say, well, let me take this information, digest this information perhaps in a 100,000 row data set. So it really comes down to the data cell designer and what familiarity he has or what he feels is optimal for the data that he's building. So let me go ahead and save this. Partners cell DP2. And we'll save this. You'll see what this will do is, now what you're seeing on the left-hand pane is the association of those two data sources. And we're going to open this up, and you can, let me just move this around a touch. And you can see a very wide set of information. So if I go ahead, and we'll do this real time, let's generate this cell, which really means we're associating these cells immediately. And these go back to the back-end DataRoket engines. They're distributed and associated in parallel. So let me go to DP2, which is now available as a cell for reporting or whatever the needs are. And let's go here. You'll see that all the objects or columns are available for, and you know what, we'll even choose perhaps maybe a little bit of a pretty report. The reporting aspect and BI aspect will be another set of videos that will discuss what you're seeing right now in detail. I just want to really show that we're speaking to the cubes of information, cells of information. And let me just pull some more in there. I think we'll have maybe some information that last name and description. And let me just show this. And you can see this is all our data in real-time format. In other words, we've built during that generation that you saw was real-time against the SQL Server database, and then Excel, the association within seconds, and here's the row set that's going back. And we can, like I said, we'll go into the different pieces such as formulas and things like that more in the BI aspect in the next video. Now let's take this a step further, and you saw two data providers that were joined, and we do, you'll see during our creation of these cells, they're 2x2 associations, but that doesn't mean that we can't go to the nth level, and we do for several clients that we're doing parallel 10 data provider joins across Excel, Access, SQL Server, Wachovia accounts, the different flavors of Excel, and some of the other data sources that we have. So let me take a step back, and the cells that we just created, let's take a look at that a touch in depth. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the cell that we created, partner cell DP2. You can see the wide array of objects and data types that we have. Let's go ahead and take a look at the child relationship of this. Let's go ahead and say get childs. It's a very large column structure, so let's zoom out a little bit more. You can see the different relationships that we just built came from query source. Zoom a touch more. Query source 1 and the query source 2. You can see very big relationships. Let me go ahead and close this. Let's take it a step farther. Now we can bind persisted information to persisted information, real time to real time, real time cells to persisted cells, and vice versa to the nth level. In other words, we're showing 2x2 associations, but at the same time, we can go ahead and what we do in DataRoket and DataRoket Engine is parallel process nth relationship data associations, data providers. So let's take these two data sources. This was an existing data source, NY estimate payments. This data comes from Microsoft Access and also a secondary SQL Server database. So let me go ahead and bind these relationships. Now we don't really need to see all this information. Let me just grab what I want to see. So from data source or cell 1, which is already two data providers bound, let me just pull this back some information that I think is nice to bind together and see. Let's take a look farther down. Some date types, some random variables, numerics, measures. And then let's go ahead and we'll bring everything back from the these two data providers already. Let me associate information, and I'm going to associate investor number to, in this case, we'll go down the list, investor ID. I know it's in this table. There it is, or in this structure. And you can see full to full joins, in or outer. The choices are still available. And let me go ahead and save these. Let me save this relationship. This will be our partners for DP cell association. Let me go ahead. We'll close this screen. We'll take a look now at what we have here, the 4 DPs, which are now the association of the other two data providers pulled together. And then let me go ahead and we can generate this. And this is all real time, so what you're seeing. So these are real-time associations that are happening. Now let me go back into our reporting interface, and we'll go back to, we'll just choose Customized Report Grid. Let's go to Partners DP, and you can see we'll just randomly pull some information in from any of these sources. It doesn't matter. Let me show that data. And you can see we can dynamically just add more. We can also perform OLAP, but once again, a conversation for the BI reporting aspect of DataRoket. Now if I go back to the relationships, let me go back to my cells. And here are my cells. And I go ahead and we take a look at the 4 DPs and their association across those 4 data providers. In this case, as we mentioned already, Excel, one SQL Server database, Microsoft Access, second SQL Server database. I could relate this to unstructured Wachovia information. I could keep going down to the nth degree. So let's take a look really quick at these child relationships of this 4. And you're going to see, now this is DataRoket, that this is the complex relationship that we've built across these very wide data sources. And that's the cell association in full. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.